Welcome to Biscuits and Gravy. Today I'm reading Factotum by Bukowski. Chapter 1. I arrived in New Orleans in the rain at 5 o'clock in the morning. I sat around in the bus station for a while, but the people depressed me, so I took my suitcase and went out in the rain and began walking. I didn't know where the rooming houses were, where the poor section was. I had a cardboard suitcase that was falling apart. It had once been black, but the black coating had peeled off and yellow cardboard was exposed. I had tried to solve that by putting black shoe polish over the exposed cardboard. As I walked along in the rain, the shoe polish on the suitcase ran and unwittingly I rubbed black streaks on both legs of my pants as I switched the suitcase from hand to hand. Well, it was a new town. Maybe I get lucky. The rain stopped and the sun came out. I was in the Black District. I walked along slowly. Hey, poor white trash. I put my suitcase down. A high yellow was sitting on the porch steps, swinging her legs. She did look good. Hello, poor white trash. I didn't say anything. I just stood there looking at her. How'd you like a piece of ass, poor white trash? She laughed at me. She had her legs crossed high and she kicked her feet. She had nice legs, high heels, and she kicked her legs and laughed. I picked up my suitcase and began to approach her up the walk. As I did, I noticed a side curtain on a window to my left moved just a bit. I saw a black man's face. He looked like Jersey Joe Wolcott. I backed down the pathway to the sidewalk. Her laughter followed me down the street. Chapter 2. I was in a room on the second floor across from a bar. The bar was called the Gangplank Cafe. From my room, I could see through the open bar doors and into the bar. There were some rough faces in that bar, some interesting faces. I stayed in my room at night and drank wine and looked at the faces in the bar while my money ran out. In the daytime, I took long, slow walks. I sat for hours staring at pigeons. I only ate one meal a day so my money would last longer. I found a dirty cafe with a dirty proprietor, but you got a big breakfast. Hot cakes, grits, sausage, for very little. Chapter 3. I went out on the street, as usual, one day and strolled along. I felt happy and relaxed. The sun was just right, mellow. There was peace in the air. As I approached the center of the block, there was a man standing outside the doorway of a shop. I walked past. Hey, buddy. I stopped and turned. You want a job? I walked back to where he stood. Over his shoulder, I could see a large, dark room. There was a long table with men and women standing on both sides of it. They had hammers with which they pounded objects in front of them. In the gloom, the objects appeared to be clams. They smelled like clams. I turned and continued walking down the street. I remembered how my father used to come home each night and talk about his job to my mother. The job talk began when he entered the door, continued over the dinner table, and ended in the bedroom where my father would scream, "Lights out," at 8 p.m., so he could get his rest and his full strength for the job the next day. There was no other subject except the job. Down by the corner, I was stopped by another man. "Listen, my friend," he began. "Yes?" I asked. "Listen, I'm a veteran of World War I. I put my life on the line for this country, but nobody will hire me. Nobody will give me a job. They don't appreciate what I did. I'm hungry. Give me some help." "I'm not working." "You're not working?" "That's right." I walked away. I crossed the street to the other side. "You're lying," he screamed. "You're working. You've got a job." A few days later, I was looking for one. Chapter 4. He was a man behind the desk with a hearing aid, and the wire ran down along the side of his face and into his shirt where he hid the battery. The office was dark and comfortable. He was dressed in a worn brown suit with a wrinkled white shirt and a necktie frayed at the edges. His name was Heathercliff. I had seen the ad in the local paper, and the place was near my room. Need ambitious young man with an eye to the future. Experience not necessary. Begin in delivery room and work up. I waited outside with 5 or 6 young men, all of them trying to look ambitious. We had filled out our employment applications, and now we waited. I was the last to be called. "Mr. Chinaski, what made you leave the railroad yards?" "Well, I don't see any future in the railroads. They have good unions, medical care, retirement. At my age, retirement might almost be considered superfluous. Why did you come to New Orleans?" "I had too many friends in Los Angeles, friends I felt were hindering my career. I wanted to go where I could concentrate unmolested." "How do we know that you'll remain with us any length of time?" "I might not." "Why?" "Your ad stated that there was a future for an ambitious man. If there isn't any future here, then I must leave." "Why haven't you shaved your face? Did you lose a bet?" "Not yet." "Not yet?" "No. I bet my landlord that I could land a job in one day even with this beard." "All right. We'll let you know." "I don't have a phone." "That's all right, Mr. Chinaski." I left and went back to my room. I went down the dirty hall and took a hot bath. Then I put my clothes back on and went out and got a bottle of wine. I came back to the room and sat by the window drinking and watching the people in the bar, watching the people walk by. I drank slowly and began to think again of getting a gun and doing it quickly, without all the thought and talk. A matter of guts. I wondered about my guts. I finished the bottle and went to bed and slept. About 4 p.m. I was awakened by a knock on the door. It was a Western Union boy. I opened the telegram. "Mr. H. Chinaski, report to work 8 a.m. tomorrow. Room, Heathercliff Company." Chapter 5. It was a magazine publisher's distributing house, and we stood at the packing table checking the orders to see that the quantities coincided with the invoices. Then we signed the invoice and either packed the order for out-of-town shipment or set the magazines aside for local truck delivery. The work was easy and dull, but the clerks were in a constant state of turmoil. They were worried about their jobs. There was a mixture of young men and women, and there didn't seem to be a foreman. After several hours, an argument began between 2 of the women. It was something about the magazines. We were packing comic books, and something had gone wrong across the table. The 2 women became violent as the argument went on. "Look," I said, "these books aren't worth reading, let alone arguing about." "All right," one of the women said. "We know you think you're too good for this job." "Too good?" "Yes, your attitude. You think we didn't notice it?" That's when I first learned that it wasn't enough to just do your job. You had to have an interest in it, even a passion for it. I worked there 3 or 4 days. Then on Friday we were paid right up to the hour. We were given yellow envelopes with green bills and the exact change. Real money, no checks. Toward quitting time, the truck driver came back a little early. He sat on a pile of magazines and smoked a cigarette. "Yeah, Harry," he said to one of the clerks, "I got a raise today. I got a $2 raise." At quitting time, I stopped for a bottle of wine, went up to my room, had a drink, then went downstairs and phoned my company. The phone rang a long time. Finally, Mr. Heathercliff answered. He was still there. "Mr. Heathercliff." "Yes?" "This is Chinaski." "Yes, Mr. Chinaski? I want a $2 raise." "What?" "That's right. the truck driver got a raise, but he's been with us 2 years. I need a raise. We're giving you $17 a week now, and you're asking for 19? That's right. Do I get it or not? We just can't do it. Then I quit. I hung up. Chapter 6. Monday I was hung over. I shaved off my beard and followed up an ad. I sat across from the editor, a man in shirt sleeves with deep hollows under his eyes. He looked as if he hadn't slept for a week. It was cool and dark in there. It was the composing room of one of the town's 2 newspapers, the small one. Men sat at desks under reading lamps working at copy. $12 a week, he said. All right, I said, I'll take it. I worked with a little fat man with an unhealthy-looking paunch. He had an old-fashioned pocket watch on a gold chain, and he wore a vest, a green sunshade, had thick lips, and a meaty dark look to his face. The lines in his face had no interest or character. His face looked as if it had been folded several times and then smoothed out, like a piece of cardboard. He wore square shoes and chewed tobacco, squirting the juice into a spittoon at his feet. Mr. Belger, he said of the man who needed the sleep, has worked hard to put this paper on its feet. He's a good man. We were going bankrupt until he came along. He looked at me. They usually give this job to a college boy. He's a frog, I thought. That's what he is. I mean, he said, this job usually goes to a student. He can study his books while he waits for a call. Are you a student? No. This job usually goes to a student. I walked back to my workroom and sat down. The room was filled with rows and rows of metal drawers, and in the drawers were zinc engravings that had been used for ads. Many of these engravings were used again and again. There was also lots of type, customer names, and logos. The fat man would scream, "Chinaski," and I'd go see which ad or what type he wanted. Often I was sent to the competing newspaper to borrow some of their type. They borrowed ours. It was a nice walk, and I found a place in a back alley where I could get a glass of beer for a nickel. There weren't many calls from the fat man, and the nickel beer place became my hangout. The fat man began to miss me. At first, he simply gave me unkind looks. Then, one day he asked, "Where you been?" "Out getting a beer." "This is a job for a student." "I'm not a student. I gotta let you go. I need somebody who is right here all the time available." The fat man took me over to Belger, who looked as tired as ever. "This is a job for a student, Mr. Belger. I'm afraid this man doesn't fit in. We need a student." "All right," said Belger. The fat man padded off. "What do we owe you?" asked Belger. 5 days. "Okay, take this down to payroll." "Listen, Belger, that old fuck is disgusting." Belger sighed. "Jesus Christ, don't I know it?" I went down to payroll.